stream started, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Good morning, councillors, officers, members of the public and press. Welcome to this meeting of Finance and Policy Committee. This meeting is a remote one and it's being live streamed on our website as well as recorded. I'll now hand over to David Cosgrove from the Democratic Services team.
Good morning, members. Good morning, everyone. We'll begin the meeting by way of a roll call of those in attendance. May I request that members can confirm that they have a paper copy of the agenda and can both hear and see all the councillors in the meeting. Councillor Christopher Akers-Belcher.
President, I have the papers and I can see and hear everyone.
Thank you. Councillor Brewer.
Hello, and yes to both.
Councillor Brown.
Sorry, David, couldn't get the mic off there. Yes, everything at this end. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lindridge.
Can see, can hear and have the papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Little.
I can see and hear and have papers.
I believe we have apologies from Councillor Marshall. Councillor Moore.
Present and have all the papers.
Councillor Smith.
Here and I have all the papers.
Thank you. Councillor Tennant.
I'm here and I have all the papers.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Yes and yes.
Thank you. And Councillor Young.
Yes to all.
Thank you. We also have President Councillor Tony Richardson. Are there any other councillors online? No, that's it. Okay. Thank you, members. Can I also just remind all participants in the meeting, as set out in the remote meeting etiquette guide, they should keep the microphones on mute so as to reduce background noise during the meeting and in the live stream. And can I also remind us about the voting process for our remote meetings, that where we require a vote, that will be done by a recorded vote. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you, David. Moving on to item number 1, apologies for absence. Are there any other apologies from members additional to those mentioned in the roll call? No. Okay. Declarations of interest. Do we have any from any members today? Okay, take that as a no. Okay, agenda item 3, the minutes of the Finance and Policy Committee held on the 21st of September. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes as presented in the report? Councillor Akers-Belcher.
Thank you, Chair. It was just in relation to the community safety plan and whether or not a date has been agreed yet for the police to do their members' seminar with us.
Thank you. I believe Denise McGuckin can answer that one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got agreement that the Chief Constable will come at the next members' seminar. The date is scheduled, it's already in members' calendars, but I can confirm that in writing later today.
Is that all right, Councillor Akers-Belcher? Anything further?
Yeah, that's fine. It's just that sometimes when we receive them through the invites to the members' seminar, just says members' seminar, and it would be helpful if the invitations went out and it actually had on the invitation to populate your diary what the title of the members' seminar would be.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Thank you. Okay, if everybody else is happy with the minutes, we'll take them as read and agreed if there is no dissent. Thank you. Item 5.1, Towns Fund Accelerated Funding Award, and this will be led by the Director of Resources and Development.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to provide an update on the accelerated funding that the government have provided under the Towns Fund initiative. Hartlepool's been allocated £1 million of that funding. As members are aware, the Towns Fund is a central government initiative. Hartlepool's still currently working through the detailed bid, and I think the government have actually brought forward some of that funding. It's quite a late announcement because the funding has to be spent before the end of the financial year, which obviously spending £1 million in that timescale is quite a challenge. So the issue is being considered by the Towns Fund board, because that's the governance arrangements that we have to follow in line with the government's rules, and effectively they've identified 2 schemes to be brought forward and funded from that £1 million that, as I say, has to be spent before the end of the financial year. I nearly said calendar year there. It's both the properties are in Church Street. The details are set out in sections 5 and 6 of the report, respectively, in relation to 15 Church Street and 16 Church Street. A lot of the details set out in the not for publication appendix, because obviously we're at a sensitive stage in terms of subject to member approval going out to get contracts, etc. So we wouldn't want to declare the council's hand. But as if we said before, once contracts are drawn up and amounts are known, those amounts will go into the public domain in the monitoring reports. We flagged obviously some of the risks in the report in relation to renovating buildings in Church Street that are in disrepair. In relation to Church Street, it's being fully costed. The budget includes a contingency. The property for 16 Church Street is more about making it watertight in a new roof and helping to alleviate the need for further grant funding for that scheme. So other than that, Chair, I'd refer members to the detailed recommendations in section 15 of the report, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I'll remind members that if there are any questions that relate to the items on pink papers, you'll need to notify that before so we can go into closed session. I mean, with this report, I know there may be some members, and I know there's certainly some members of the public who would have potentially preferred this money to be spent elsewhere. But I think, as Chris pointed out, the limitation on this was that these projects needed to be completed by the end of this financial year. And there was only a very limited number of projects that could have been brought forward, and these were taken to the town deal board, who were made up of local business owners and residents and other interests, who have also agreed that this would be the best project to take forward at this point. Councillor Akers-Belcher.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would just like to put on record I have no problem with the proposal whatsoever. Like, I think it's an excellent scheme. I sit on the Towns Fund board, and I think they would welcome the investment. What I would like to put on record is that we made a decision with regards to one of the properties going back to March 2019 in the report, and I would just like to express my disappointment that it's taken so long to get to this point where we can accelerate investment into Church Street. And I understand the reasons why. I've had a conversation with a number of officers, but we've had a decision record that's been sat on the council papers since March 2019 about investment, where we made a decision that we were going to accelerate money into that area in order to boost the local economy, and it hasn't happened. I understand the reasons why, but I think that should have been articulated to committee members, and members should be kept informed all along the way rather than have to ask the questions. And I think there needs to be a better mechanism going forward where members are fully informed if there is a lack of progress in our investment. And just another point that I want to raise, and I don't need any responses, I understand the reasons why, but I want to put on record that we need some democracy in the system where we are explained when there's delays. And I would like to point out that we are required to invest in the local economy, and we made a decision in August around converting £500,000 from loan into grants. And as chair of regeneration, I'm still waiting for someone to show me a proposal around the criteria for getting those grants out into the businesses in Hartlepool or potential businesses, because potentially we've got the local economy that's going to be on its knees, and we've got £500,000 sat there waiting that we could be utilising to boost the local economy. And I think as early as possible, even if it's a special meeting of finance and policy, we need to consider that proposal.
Thank you, Councillor. I think you raised some really good points, especially on the capital projects part of it. As you'll be aware from the conversations that we've had, I think now that we have a new assistant director in place who's specifically looking at the capital plan, I think we should make quite a bit of headway, and I'm confident from the conversations we've had with Bev that will happen. And I would hope that as she finds her feet a bit more, she's able to articulate and keep members updated as to exactly where we are. You'll also be aware that in relation to the grant funding, I do share your frustration, and we have asked for that report to come forward to informal policy chairs. I think it's this week. Is it Thursday? Wednesday, sorry. Yeah. Councillor Little, you had your hand up at one point, have you?
It's just when you first read the report, it says, like from the town fund, if the general public picked this piece of paper up, I think we could spend £1 million out of our own town fund money. It doesn't mean like we've got a grant from somewhere. I just think it needs to be like where the funding's come from, so that members of the public can see that it's not come from the council coffers. That's all. That's where. So when people say, oh, well, where's that come? Why are you spending it on Church Street? Why are you spending it on Shades? Why are you spending it on the other place? So they know exactly where it's come from, and it's easy for us to explain where it's come from then.
No, that's it. That's a good point, and hopefully if Nick is or somebody else from the Mail is watching, they'll pick that point up and articulate it, but we'll make sure our press office make that point known as well, if that's all right with you.
Yeah. Great. But and in future other reports, when we've got grants available, where it's actually come from, because then it's a lot easier to explain to the members of the public.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
No problem. Councillor Young.
Chair, I agree with what Councillor Little's just said, but I do note in point 8.1 in financial considerations, the first paragraph actually says that it is a grant. It does say in section 8 of the report.
Can I come back?
Yeah.
It's just in the main, in your main headlines, the purpose of the report. That's where it should go in also, because how many members of the public will read that and then they'll just see red, and then when you get to 8, how many get to 8.1 to say it's a grant? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get at. That's
bit more clear, plain English in the purpose of the report.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from members? Okay. If you turn to page 7, then the recommendations under 15. If people are happy, we'll take the recommendations as in the report, unless there is any dissent that anybody would like to show now. Okay, if we're all happy to approve, then we'll approve those recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you, members. Agenda item 6.1, COVID-19 financial position update, and this is from the Managing Director.
I think it's from the Managing Director, but I'm going to take it because there's quite a few updates on the numbers, and I haven't had time to brief Denise before this morning because some of them just came in this morning. So if members don't mind, I'll take you through the report. It's to give you an update on effectively 6 key areas in relation to COVID, and particularly the funding. Section 3 is the first of the issues. It's the service delivery decision records. I've set out in the background where we're at in terms of the government funding. I'll start with an apology. I'd only included 2 tranches of the government funding in this report. As you'll all remember, we brought a further report to F&P on the 13th of August. We've actually had 3 tranches of funding from the government. The third one was 500 million, and Hartlepool was allocated 1,013,000. When you took into account that third tranche and the collection fund deficit position, we'd updated the forecast shortfall to 2.154 million that the council faced in terms of COVID costs and COVID losses of income. So it was just an apology for that oversight when preparing the report. Since the report was prepared last Monday, the government made a headline announcement I think it was when the Prime Minister was speaking, announcing a fourth tranche of funding of £1 billion. They haven't yet said how that will be allocated, but if it's based on the previous allocation methodologies, we could get between 1.6 million and 2 million. So given that we're about 2.1 million short on our last estimate of the COVID impact, that's a really positive sign. I don't want to sound too positive on a Monday morning. We're still working through the impact of COVID, and we're at the half-year point, or we've just passed the half-year point. So we're busy working through that, and we'll be updating F&P shortly on that. Obviously, there's a concern that probably about a month ago we thought we'd turned a corner, but obviously everyone's aware that the numbers have picked up, and we're in a difficult position. And depending on where cases go over the next few weeks, that'll determine the local impact, and obviously that could lead to increased costs. It could lead to greater reductions in income than we'd forecast, because it'll just all depend how things start to change over the remainder of the year. But as I say, we're working on an update to come forward to a future F&P. At paragraph 3.4, we cover the decision records that have been made since you had the full report back in June. There are 2 that have been extended, and there is an additional decision record around building adaptations. Also on Friday last week, we circulated an additional decision record, which is in relation to the test and trace grant, and I'll come on to that later on, but you've got all of the information now in relation to the decision records. The second point relates to separate funding that the government are providing for the test and trace service support grant. Nationally, they've allocated £300 million to help councils work with Public Health England in terms of containing outbreaks and managing the transition at a local level. We've been allocated 825,000. This one has a requirement that the managing director has to sign it off, and for some reason it's the chief internal auditor authority rather than the section 151 officer that has to sign this one off. Some of the government departments do that from time to time. And obviously there's criteria to meet. We've put in place arrangements for managing that grant, and when we come forward in future reports, we'll give you details of what it's planned to spend that money on and why. But at the moment, it's been quite an early announcement or a recent announcement. Sorry. The next issue in section 5 deals with local restriction support funding, and I think this picks up the point members have just made a moment ago about support for businesses. The government made this announcement back on the 9th of September. It only actually applies when an area moves into Tier 3, so it doesn't yet apply in Hartlepool. Since we prepared the report, the government have actually changed the amounts of grant that are available. So it's based on the rateable value of premises, and instead of payments being made for a 3-week period, they're now made for a 2-week period. So it's a slightly better scheme for businesses if the areas in the tier where they'd qualify. So if a business has got a rateable value under 15,000, the 2-weekly grant is £667. The rateable value between 15,000 and 51, it's £1,000. And if the rateable value is above 51,000, it's £1,500. So if there was a month's closure, a business would have effectively got £3,000 at the top level, whereas previously it was a lower amount of £1,500. Councils will also get a top-up grant, which will be 5% of the total that they pay out to have some local discretion. But we don't know how much the total is, so we don't know how much the 5% would be because we're not in that situation yet. But it's really just to give members a flavour of what the changes are at a national level. Section 6 deals with test and trace support payments. I think it might be more helpful if the government had some different names for some of these grants because it gets a little bit confusing. These are payments to individual households. This was an initiative announced on a Sunday by the government, the 20th of September, and there was very little detail. It was just a headline announcement that these payments would be available, and councils would be managing the scheme. Since then, councils have been waiting for information to come from the government, and that's still coming out up to yesterday. We got some further information. I'll say a little bit more in a moment. Effectively, this is linked to if someone's required to self-isolate and they meet the qualifying criteria that the government have set, which are summarised in 6.4, they would be eligible for a payment of £500. The government have said that payment will be subject potentially to income tax, but it will not be subject to income tax at the time someone receives it. The HMRC will catch up with people later on. So I assume what they would do if someone over the course of the tax year received this payment and had taxable other income that took them above various tax thresholds, there'd be an adjustment to the tax code. But it's just so members are aware that people will be subject to tax. We had to have in place the system by the 12th of October. It's been quite a frustrating process in terms of getting access to the databases at a national level. We didn't have access when I came down this morning. We've got access to a backup system that relies on a telephone system to validate some of the information. We were trying to process claims over the weekend. Unfortunately, the government changed the arrangements and introduced a passcode and hadn't told us our passcode. So that frustrated things over the weekend a little bit. Just so members know, so far we've had 90 applications and we're working through those as we speak and aiming to pay them as soon as practical and in line with the 3 days set by the government. And the decision record I referred to earlier, we've been given a cash limited sum of £32,000 to help people who don't meet the main criteria. Anybody who meets the main criteria at the council will be fully reimbursed. But effectively, we've got 32,000, and we've set out in the decision record the criteria for the little bit of local flexibility. Next part in section 7 deals with reopening the high street. Safety fund. This is just some European funding that's been allocated. We're just giving you the headlines of how much Hartlepool's been allocated, £82,445, and the details are set out in the not for publication appendix. Similarly, there's grant funding under the Emergency Active Travel Fund, and again, the report sets out we've received 86,000 from that. And I'm happy to take any questions that members may have, and if not, the recommendation is you just note the report at this stage.
Thank you, Chris. As members will be aware, looking at some of the funding that's come through there, unfortunately, we're in a kind of perverse situation where in Tier 2, some of our businesses are being hit unfairly, but they're not getting any financial assistance from the government. However, what it does mean is that the general public still have quite a bit of liberty and freedom to go about somewhat of a normal life. Whereas if we were to go into Tier 3, if we were to go into Tier 3, some of our businesses would get some additional funding, but then the general public lose even more of their liberties and they're effectively locked down. So it's a terrible balancing act. And unfortunately, the way that the current system is set up, it's almost like central government are trying to bribe authorities into going into Tier 3 because it's the only way that they will give any assistance to local businesses. And it's a terrible, terrible situation to be in, to be honest. I'll move on to see if anybody else has anything to say, though. Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chair. I think you made some interesting points there, but I think what we need to be realistic about is regardless of Tier 2 or Tier 3, we're in a position where businesses can't see tomorrow. And I think going back to what Councillor Akers-Belcher said in his comments in the last report, we are really in a position where even if people are let out, there'll be nowhere for them to go. And I think as somebody who is probably going to be restricted from leaving my house potentially in the next few days, I find it absolutely incredible that we're in a position where the first lockdown, we seemed to have 4 days worth of clear instruction as to what that was going to look like. And here we are now discussing stuff that might happen or might not happen. And yet businesses are just left to their own devices at a time where footfall is down to as even as low as 5% of the usual people walking through the door. And I just think that you know, yes, the government must do better, but even as a local authority, there's surely ways that we can make progress and support those businesses, because we've got a long-standing historic economic interest in businesses as a local authority. It's something that we've prided ourselves on for decades, and I just worry that we are not putting ourselves kind of in the mix where these businesses may benefit from our support, and based again on what Councillor Akers-Belcher said on funds that we may have. And I think there's a real concern, and it has me incredibly flatlined in that respect. I feel really kind of fed up that we don't have, or don't appear to have, an emergency plan to try and help businesses. It just seems ridiculous to me.
And I understand the frustration there, Councillor Young. I really do, and I know we've had many conversations about this, but it's about maximising what resources we have, because whilst we only have, as a local authority, very limited funds and resources to be able to help local businesses, really this is a problem that's been imposed by national government, and we need to put a lot of pressure on them to assist our businesses, and then whatever they can stump up, or even if it's stumped up from a combined authority level who have quite a bit of extra money available, then we can maximise what we have by topping that up or filling in the gaps, and that's what we'll be discussing at informal policy chairs in the next few days, I would hope.
Can I just come back? Sorry,
yeah.
I agree with everything you've said. I think it's a reasonable commentary, but I think I'm trying to look at it from the other side, and you know, the local authority's taken a lot of flack over the last few weeks for decisions that government have made, regardless of our need and desire to have those conversations with central government. They've made the decision, but that doesn't help local businesses, and I think we've got to be. I appreciate the meeting on Wednesday is going to discuss this, but I really feel like we are entering a very bizarre phase. And I know the towns and cities will be feeling the same, but we're entering a bizarre phase where there'll be nothing left to rescue, and I think that's a sad fact.
And the best thing we can do, and I'm probably going to make Councillor Brown smile here, is get out and encourage our people and give them the confidence to get out there and help our small businesses as much as possible. Show them that these businesses are COVID safe. It's still safe to go out and enjoy a family meal together. So really what we need everybody to do, me, you, everybody, is to go out and rally around our small businesses and help them out. Even if it's just £5 extra a week, in spending in a local independent shop, that's going to protect jobs, protect our local economy, and keep these businesses ticking over. That's the most important message that I would like to get out over the coming days and weeks, because we all have the ability to help these businesses out, and that's our first port of call, in my opinion. As an authority, we have a good platform to be able to spread that message, and I think we should be doing that first off as we look at everything else. Councillor Little.
Right. I think the residents have already made their decision which tier they want to be in. If you look at, I've been listening to local radio. 2 secs of dogs barking. Just give them some sweets. I've been listening to local radio and reading social media over the weekend. Patronage in pubs and bars and restaurants is down by 90% for some people, even more. I know there was a gin bar in Stockton said that they had no customers over the weekend. I know that's Stockton and they've just came into tier 2, but that could have happened in Hartlepool as well. So I think the residents have already made their decision what tier they want to be, because they're not going out to do it. And I have been going out still to try and help my local businesses in Seaton to like stay open, not on an evening, during the day. I've been doing that. And I know Councillor Christopher Aker-Belcher also mentioned the money that the council's got set aside, but hasn't the combined authority also got money set aside to help businesses like myself, because I include myself in that. You just have to look down the side of the Civic Centre, how many yellow cabs are all lined up. I've never seen so many yellow cabs out there. And normally, if they see how far back they are in the queue, they'll go home, but they're not. They're staying there because there's nobody using them. And if they don't stay out, like some of these drivers are on less than living wage. I know they're self-employed, but they're on less than living wage, and they'd be, even if they just take the covering costs, that's where a lot of them would be doing. Never mind like the local shops and stuff. But I do think we should reach out to our residents and say shop local. You don't need to go to the big supermarkets. Not just for Christmas presents. You can get all little daft Christmas ornaments. Like go to your little people who do your arts and crafts. Maybe if we could have an arts and crafts stall in the town centre, or something. Like just reach out to those people who have all those gifts of being able to make fantastic things. Not like myself, I'm rubbish, but there'd be some people out there who have got brilliant gifts which that could help our economy by buying off them. But I'm going to go before the dog barks even more.
Thank you, Councillor Little. Councillor Aker-Belcher.
Thank you, Chair. And picking up one of the points that Sue raised, I believe you're already in conversation with the Combined Authority about accessing additional funds, so that'll be welcome, should that come to fruition. But I really want to pick up on Councillor Young's point and the frustration with businesses. And just to use an example, and I know I'm like a broken record, but going back to, it's nearly 2 years since we had a proposal around student accommodation, and I had a meeting about 5 or 6 weeks ago with the people who put that proposal forward, and they were promised a response. That was 5 weeks ago. The business is still waiting for that response, and every month that goes by, that business proposal could have netted the council approximately £50,000. And I just I'm just at a loss. It's pointless just waiting for the government to be giving us money. We've got a responsibility as the biggest employer in the town to do things ourselves and be proactive. And we're not even being given the opportunity as members to consider a business proposal. And I just think it's really disappointing that businesses who are coming to us to help us and invest in the local economy are not even getting the courtesy of a response, and members aren't being given the opportunity to make a decision on a proposal.
Chris Little, would you like to come in on that?
It was just to confirm a response will go out today. It was finalised last week, so it will go out today.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it is as you've said earlier in this meeting, it's an extremely difficult situation. And I take on board the points that Sue made. And there are businesses such as pubs that are struggling worse than most. But there are other businesses that, whilst they're struggling, are not struggling as bad as pubs. And with every respect for publicans, and I do think the government need to build publicans out more, but I think we need to be very careful as a council what decisions we make when we make a bulk decision that will affect all businesses. Because I think a massive percentages of businesses, whilst they aren't trading as good as they would have been, they are trading sustainably and they will get by this. But a tier 3 could shut a lot down. Obviously, depending on government help, but if we're looking at the last lot of government help, it was nowhere near enough. So I think we need to make a very careful decision on what we do with that decision going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Okay, if there are no more questions and comments, sorry. The recommendation is just to note this report. Is there any objections to that? If not, we'll note the report and move on. Okay, thank you. There are no other items for information and no other business. So that is it for today. Thank you all very much for your time. Thank you for your input and have a lovely day. Speak soon.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.